It's good enough for me. Makes me love everybody. Makes me love everybody. Makes me love everybody. And it's good enough for me. So give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Good for our mothers. It was good for our mothers. And it's good enough for me.
From WBR Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network, the title of the episode is Politics in Black and White. We were talking to several people today, as we normally do, about politics, and in particular the saga of one Judge Roy Moore, who is a candidate for the U.S. Senate in Alabama. As people are aware, a person came out today named Nelson that accused Judge Moore of groping her in the back of a car 40 years ago. She was represented by the ambulance chaser Gloria Allred. Now, the political advisability of bringing Gloria Allred into this case is not very good because of her reputation. A lady asked me today about the allegations against Judge Moore. First of all, these allegations are 40 years old, at least to date, and Judge Moore has said that he was a man that looked and winked and flirted with teenagers, 18, 17, or whatever. That is out there by Judge Moore. He's denied the allegations that first accused her that he didn't know her. This Nelson, all we know about her is there was a page from her yearbook that Judge Moore signed. And at the time he was DA, and he put that in the yearbook. Not hardly a man trying to cover up an illicit relationship there as far as we know. But part of the problem with all of these allegations is, according to the local people, and we'll get to it in a minute, in that community it was known that Roy Moore was out and about in the malls, in the restaurants, etc., and flirted with young women. In other words, it was common knowledge there. So we move 40 years later. I've always been troubled by these types of allegations because, first of all, they're old. Most of them, there's no evidence. There's obviously no physical evidence. They're not verified by any second party, and that's back to the lady asked me the question. Simply, I was not there. Period. And the problem here is, and we've had all these allegations coming out now against the first President Bush, George H.W. Bush. Some 16-year-old claimed he groped her. Well, as this professor said, he's in the role of a dirty old man in his wheelchair. Well, a dirty old man in his wheelchair, so what? We excuse that. But what happens in terms of social media and news in particular, when you have incidents, and you have several of these incidents, and they get to be much more numerous, people then become conditioned and desensitized to it. And that is a known fact. Studies have put that out. I hate to always say studies because they have the studies there. But this particular saga there in Alabama, first of all, denunciation by old man McConnell and various other Republicans. Those people, for the most part, have opposed Roy Moore from the day he entered the campaign. They backed any of the above. Lupus Strangelove. Now, the problem here is when you get to this petty moralizing operation, Lupus Strangelove would literally put the lives of hundreds of thousands and millions of people at risk. Why? Because he is opposed to Obamacare. He is a supporter of giving away tax write-offs to the rich. That is harmful to the social fabric of America and should be called out on that. There are much more important issues here than a judge and a candidate that 40 years ago did whatever. In other words, there's no criminal culpability involved, as no one has said there is. As far as to date, there's no civil actions going on there, and perhaps they will come later, but it would be very, very hard to prove anything, even with a quote-unquote preponderance of evidence standard. This is nothing more than dirty politics in Alabama. They first went after Judge Moore's foundation. Evidently, there was no traction there. So now they have this. As Judge Moore said, and we'll get to that in a minute, a statement that he is 10 points or more ahead. Now we'll wait and see. 2 weeks we presented that from the Emerson College. There's another poll that says that Mr. Jones is 5 points ahead, and I think it's a 3.5 margin of error poll with people undecided. So the race could be tight, and it could not be tight. Depends on the methodology by the various posters. Now, these posters were automated posters. Both of them were. In other words, you push button 1, button 2, button 3, whatever. And they were taken from list of registered voters. Now, it's a little bit different from the Quinnipiac poll that was dead on the money in terms of accuracy in Virginia. And even the poll from the historic Hampton University and African American University. So those, are some of the things that out here. But when you get into an emotional thing, I heard another fellow talking today. Well, even if Judge Moore is elected, they're going to get him out of here. Well, they tried that with Adam Clayton Powell, and we'll get to that one also in a minute. A lot of things we'll get into in a minute. But we'll talk about the case briefly about what happened to Representative Powell. It was around, but they wanted to get rid of Representative Powell. I guess we'll go to it now. And there was a civil case that he did not settle, a defamation case. In fact, this woman was known to everyone in Harlem, but she was a bag woman. But yet no one would testify, so Adam Clayton Powell was stuck with a judgment. He didn't pay the judgment, and based upon other things, plus he was also at that time the prior to that, the chair of the House Education Committee. They wanted to first strip him of titles. They could do that. That's his inner political activity there. The speaker was John McCormick of the Commonwealth. Nonetheless, Adam Clayton Powell sued the Speaker of the House. And let me just go to that case so we can clear up one of these. Powell versus McCormick, very, very, it was 395 U.S. 466, 1969 to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's where the case went. It was Adam Clayton Powell Jr., senior member of the United States House of Representatives, embroiled in a scandal specifically around allegations that he had refused to pay a judgment ordered by a court in New York. Powell was reelected in 1966, and in January of 1967, the 90th of Congress convened. The Speaker of the House was John Williams McCormick, asked Representative Powell to abstain from taking the oath of office. This is basically the same thing that they want to do with Roy Moore. The House adopted Resolution 1, which stripped Powell, this is the story here, of his committee chairship, excluded him from taking his seat, and created a special committee to investigate misdeeds. In other words, they'd cast him as a special person. After the Select Committee conducted its investigation and hearings in March of 1967, the House adopted by 278 votes of 307 to 116, which excluded Powell from Congress and also censored him with a fine at that time of $25,000. That would be several $100,000. They took away his seniority, declared his seat vacant. Representative Powell, Congressman Powell, with 13 constituents, filed a suit in the district court in the District of Columbia, naming McCormick and others. and an effort to get injunctions barring the enforcement of Resolution 278 to prevent the Speaker from refusing to administer the oath of office, to prevent the clerk from refusing to perform the duties due a representative, to prevent the sergeant-at-arms from withholding Powell's salary, to prevent the doorkeeper from barring Powell from the chambers. The suit claimed, and this would be the same thing if Roy Moore were barred from Congress after being duly elected by the people of the state of Alabama, that excluding Powell amounted to an expulsion, but also an expulsion would not have garnered the necessary two-thirds vote. Now, the district court dismissed the case for lack of what's called subject matter jurisdiction. The Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia reversed the district court in an opinion by Warren Burger. Warren Burger would later be named the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, one of the quote-unquote Minnesota twins. And nonetheless, the court held that the federal courts did have a subject matter jurisdiction, but dismissed the case on two grounds: that Powell lacked standing to sue, and that the case represented a non-judiciable political question. While the suit was making its way through the courts, Powell was reelected in 1968. That seat incidentally went on to Charlie Rangel, who retired from Congress, to be reseated in the 91st Congress. The House adopted Resolution 2. So this thing went on and on there. In the aftermath decision, Congress passed the Federal Contested Election Act to formalize the process for contesting elections in the light of the court ruling. Now, this would not apply in Judge Moore's position. Nonetheless, the majority opinion was authorized by Chief Justice Warren and signed by Justice Black, Hugo Black, Justice Brennan, Justice Harlan, Justice Douglas, Justice Marshall, and Justice White. The opinion stated that Congress, being the sole judge of its members' qualifications, and the speech and debate clause of Article 1 did not preclude judicial review of constitutional issues raised in cases, but not necessarily in all cases touching upon the subject of speech and debate, are Congress judging the qualifications of its members. Because no branch is supreme, and it's the duty of the court to ensure that all branches conform to the Constitution. Majority opinion held that Congress does not have the power to develop qualifications other than those specified in Article 1, Section 2, period. It states that each house shall be the judge of the qualifications of its members, but then immediately state that each house has the authority to expel a member with the concurrence of two-thirds. The court found that it had textually demonstrated commitment to the interpretation of the clause, which in the case the court did. The court interpreted that the subject clause meant that the process that led to the expulsion of a member duly sworn and enrolled upon the body's rolls was the only method for a house to give effective its power to determine the qualification of a member. The court reasoned that the authority of Congress in this matter was post facto. That is, it attached only after a member elected had been elected under the laws of the state, in this case, the state of New York. So his district was in Harlem. They re-elected him, and he continued on. Justice Douglas concurred. It stated that the qualifications that are not part of the Constitution may not be added except by a constitutional amendment. So this takes care of Powell. Again, this is politics in black and white. Let's go now to the state of Alabama, and we'll touch upon the latest from the case. Roy Moore. I don't even know the latest accuser. This is Beverly Young Nelson in a brief appearance before reporters in a small town maybe that is Etowah. Anyway, a small Etowah County town, of Gallant. Roy Moore denied any wrongdoing and said he doesn't even know his latest accuser, who came forward. Moore speaking for a couple of minutes with reporters and took no questions. His wife Kayla, I can tell you without hesitation, this is absolutely false. Moore told reporters, "I never did what she said I did, and I don't even know the woman. I don't know anything about her." At the press conference in New York. Now, this Nelson alleged she was sexually assaulted by Moore in December of 1977. Basically almost 40 years ago. She was 16 and he was 30. She produced a high school yearbook. We already talked about that. Said she worked at the Old Hickory House in Gadsden in northeast Alabama. Moore would often flirt with her when he visited. She said he was known to touch her long red hair. "I don't even know where the restaurant is or was," Moore said. There, Nelson with her attorney, the ambulance chaser, Gloria Allred, speaking today at a press conference called upon the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is where the Powell factor comes in to investigate the allegations ahead of the December 12th election, the special election there. Moore reiterated a defense he has used since the Washington Post story, that all of these teenagers at the time said they had sexual romantic encounters with Moore when he was in his 30s. Moore said he was said repeatedly that the allegations are false and an effort to keep him from being elected to the Senate. No doubt about that. If you look at this situation, you'll see that I'm 11 or a point ahead or 10 points ahead in this race, being just 28 days out. Moore said it has nothing to do with reality. It's all about politics. That's why I would title again, Politics in Black and White. Gloria Allred is a sensationalist leading a witch hunt, and she's only around to create a spectacle, the statement said, attributed to Moore's campaign manager Bill Armstead. Moore was an attorney who claimed a credit for giving us Moore v. Wade. And this goes back to, we came in here with Willie Nelson's old-time religion, was a result of the murder of tens of thousands of unborn babies. In a brief statement, Kayla Moore, she's the wife of Judge Moore. "I've been married to this man for 32 years, she told reporters. "We've been together for 33 altogether. He has never one time lifted a finger to me. He's the most gentle, most kind man I've ever known in my life. He is godly, and everybody in this community knows it. These things are false, and it's ugly. It's the ugliest politics I have ever been in my life." That is Kayla Moore. Let's go back here to Gadsden local. This is from, incidentally, the Alabama paper out of Birmingham, Huntsville, evidently. Roy Moore's a passionate penchant for flirting with teenage girls was common knowledge. It's not a big secret around Gadsden, according to some residents. The candidate has denied any wrongdoing in wake of reports from the Post. One of four women claimed she was 14 at the time. A fifth came forward. Moore and other Republican leaders have a question why it took so long for the accusers, now in their 50s, to come forward. No doubt, this in itself is very, very strange. Yet people who live in Atwin County, I suppose, during this time, said Moore's flirting with and dating young women and girls was no secret. So in other words, not something he was doing there. These stories have been around this town for 30 years. That is from Blake Blake Usry, who grew up in the area and lives in Gadsden. Nobody could believe they haven't come out yet. Actually, a traveling nurse said she knew of several girls that Moore tried to flirt with. It's not a big secret in this town about Roy Moore. That's why it's sort of frustrating to watch the public believe the women who came forward. He said. The mall, colleagues and others who knew Moore told the Post that old Moore walked around the mall, the Gadsden Mall. That was in 1977. He would go and flirt with young girls, he said, and it seemed like every Friday or Saturday night you'd see him walking around the mall like the kids did. Jason Nims, who now lives in Tennessee, but grew up in nearby Southside, was a regular at the mall when he was a teenager. He recalled being told by a mall employee, I won't go into all this, watch out for the pickpockets and everybody else. And some other person here, Greg Leggett, I guess. No, wait a minute. Leggett? Anyway, worked at something called the Record Bar near the Sears. 81 to 85, the store was just down the back entrance of the mall near a cinema. It was a popular place to drop it off. This Leggett is 59 now, said an off-duty Gladstone cop named J.D. Thomas. I guess J.D. Thomas is probably dead now. Anyway, this is around 1981, and Thomas worked security. One of the people to watch out for, a pickpocket, while another was someone prone to pick fights, and one was Roy Moore. I asked what did he do. He said, well, if you see him, let me know. I'll take care of it. What does he do? Anyway, no idea. So that was a story around this little rural town there. But they did have a mall. They had all those things set out there. The picture of Judge Moore in his robe sitting there. I think he was 81. And various things have come across here. I'll read one or two of them, I guess. New accuser Swift denial. Well, we already went over that one. Wasn't the type to seek attention. This is from Susie Farstone, who was a 10th grade English teacher at the time. Described Nelson as a quiet and girl and a good student. She was really pretty at that time. I guess age does things to people. Beautiful red hair, according to the teacher. And more, we've already went through that. So that was that story. Again, this is not. And the paper here, which obviously supported Luther Strangelove to begin with, in their editorial, Roy Moore simply cannot be a U.S. Senator, even if his party and many of its adherents still think it's possible. It's unthinkable for this state and this country. Last week, 4 women described Moore's unseemly taste for dating young high school girls when he was a single man in his 30s. Another described what could only be seen as a sexual assault on her while she was 14. In a radio interview, Moore suggested that he may have dated during his 30s. Anyway, we talked about that. Was on Sean Hannity. Today, even as these women face disgusting attacks on their motives, credibility, a fifth brave person came forward. But what they didn't say was in New York. The seriousness of these incidents cannot be overstated. They should not be they should not be parsed with the talk of statute of limitations. Whether proof exists, well, that is always what you look at. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is consideration for a courtroom, not the ballot box. Well, I would agree there. But the problem there is that when you get into this sort of thing, you get into an Emmett Till type operation, that you come back and find out that some of these allegations were false, and that was what happened to the Scottsboro boys also. and particularly with African Americans, there's a history of this. You go to Adam Powell, the Scottsboro Boys, Emmett Till, of people outright lying and being believed at the time in an atmosphere of sensationalism. Nor should these women's statements be dismissed because of the incidents are decades old. Well, that is always a problem. And sadly, the reaction of many over the past several days support a modern understanding of women's reluctance to voice these. For that, Alabama and America owe them respect and appreciation. Well, we'll see on that one. As a news organization, we have independent investigated as many of these claims as possible and found no reason to doubt the accounts. But they've come up with no evidence either, other than the statements of the women. He's been twice removed from state. Well, that is known. And the views of Alabama, his views on women's rights, same-sex marriage, religious freedom, is no longer reflected of the majority of Alabamans. That's a lie. They're incompatible with the governance of the country. He has said that the murderous 9/11 attacks on 9/11, on America, and the tragic shooting in Newtown may have been because God. America has sinned. Well, many people have said that. Investigation into Moore's nonprofit foundation of moral law has revealed that the man who championed himself above all else, above Alabamans, above God, Moore used the platform to personally enrich himself. That disappeared, and then we come up with the quote-unquote ungodly types. Here, old man McConnell, a man that would deprive millions of people of their health care. Lindsey Graham, and Hopalong Cassidy, the same type there. Moore, in his deepest, in our opinion, his deepest, quote-unquote, we call sins, I suppose his people would call it, rises above these characters. Roy Moore, so far, has wanted to build statues, have prayers, etc., and they even attacked Moore on the birther question. Now, the birther question is one of the things that cemented D.J. Trump's career, and they said, well, when D.J. Trump gave up the birther question, D.J. Trump really never gave up the birther question. He went into the transcript of Barack Obama. So in other words, it continued on, the racism continued on. This cannot be just put at the doorstep of one Roy Moore. We look at politics in a black and in a white. There are many more machinations going on. With Beauregard Sessions, he wants to have a witch hunt of Hillary Clinton and what went on there. Now, this another article here. Moore is poison in the bloodstream of the Republican Party. Well, the Republican Party itself has run on these types of things. If the LGP community, Moore is not the only one that's attacked them. He autographs Bibles, I guess, in addition, and that should have been enough for anyone to accurately measure his character. But he politicians autograph Bibles, hats in the case of D.J. Trump, and anything else they can get their name and picture on. If Alabama elects Moore, the Republican Senate majority will be forced to make a decision allowing an alleged attempted rapist, and child molester, and invoke a rule to unseat him and not used since the onset of the Civil War. Now, that's not actually correct there. They used that on Adam Clayton Powell, at least in the House of Representatives. That would leave Alabama with only one Senate and probably would begin a new war within the Civil War within the GOP. The war in the and this is Kyle Whitman, a state political columnist for the Alabama media group. There's already a civil war in the Republican Party, period. And one has to understand that these evangelical types make up roughly about 40% of the Republican Party. That is why D.J. Trump went to the Liberty University. Incidentally, the head of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr., the Right Reverend Doctor, has endorsed Roy Moore. and dismissed these claims. So again, this is much, much bigger than just Roy Moore. If you go back to politics in black and white, you have the evangelical wing of the Republican Party, by and large, versus the other parts of the Republican Party. And at the same time, you have Mr. Steve Bannon. He's down there trying to find what he can find in Alabama. So this thing is not over till the fat lady sings. I'm not talking about Nelson here. But the whole point is this, that this thing is a saga that the American people have been, as they say, suckered into. It's a waste of a time, period, because the statute of limitations have gone, and the people of Alabama ultimately determine the fitness or unfitness of Roy Moore. They have the evidence there. Roy Moore has been around. He's been the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was deflocked, returned. He's also run for governor of the state of Alabama. So there's nothing new with Roy Moore. The people of Alabama are well acquainted with Mr. Roy Moore. Let me just very, very quickly here go to the Washington Post. Somewhere here we have this, but I'll have to do it again. With Beauregard's session and his machinations here, with some of this to go to a different we'll bring back a different time. But anyway, well, let's get Trump Jr. in here real quickly. He communicated with WikiLeaks, and I'm not sure where this is going. We'll get Beauregard sessions later. Eldest son exchanged private messages with WikiLeaks during the campaign. Jr. did not respond, obviously would not. In the messages, he urged WikiLeaks urged Trump Jr. to promote the troll of hacked Democratic emails and suggested Trump challenged the election results if he did not win. Among other ideas, first reported by The Atlantic, later reported by Trump Jr. on Twitter, WikiLeaks, which bills itself as an anti-secrecy group, was described in May by the CIA Director Mike Pompeo as a non-state hostile intelligence service. The organization released thousands of emails that had been stolen from the Democratic Committee, and there's no evidence, incidentally, that it was stolen by anyone out of the Russian, or instituted by anyone in the Russian Federation. In the message, he urged WikiLeaks urged Trump Jr. to promote the troll of that. And let me get down here. The newly revealed exchanges provides additional information about the role played by Trump Jr. Well, Trump Jr. is a busy man, and all sides of this campaign, the Clinton side, the Trump side, will monitor WikiLeaks to see what they published. That is from the attorney, Alan Futurist. And if the Washington Post or New York Times was looking to see what was being released, suggests that at a point his communications with WikiLeaks sought to learn more about the rumors of documents. Well, that's just normal political research there. 2 days later, Trump Jr. tweeted the links to his followers, writing for those who have time to read all the corruption and hypocrisy there. And the White House attorney, named Ty Cobb, I guess in relation to the baseball player, referring questions about to Trump Jr.'s lawyer, I suppose so. But this thing continues on. Clayton Watts, a former FBI agent who has been tracking the Russian situation, called Trump Jr.'s messages unprecedented. I can't think of any time in history where a foreign government, through a cutout who has been able to tap directly into the campaign anyway, he said it shows that they were complicit to this and how amenable they were to hunting another American, even if the source came from a foreign government. Well, I don't know that, again, this is the politics of the time. And so when you start talking about Roy Moore and his little escapades 40 years ago, has nothing to do with what is going on there. We're missing Beauregard's session here for some reason. Anyway, he's still here, trying to get a witch hunt, called a special prosecutor, going on Hillary Clinton's and the Clinton Foundation. Evidently, there was some uranium through a company in Canada, old hatch, basically speaking there, that had been investigated many times, period. DJ Trump has, of course, finished his tour of Asia. He skipped a preliminary session. That's not unusual. DJ Trump doesn't really care very much about preliminary sessions. I probably know what they are, but anyway. So he skipped out on one. Let's go to sport now. I hope we have enough time here. The power rankings here. This is the NBA around several teams. Oops. Golden State is ranked number 1, 10-3. Then the Rockets of Houston, and let's see, number 2. This is the Celtics, number 3. The Celtics haven't lost a game since their 0-2 start to the season, according to the Ellis Sports Bureau research. Their 12-game winning streak is tied with the 2006-2007 Mavericks. The Spurs are number 4, but this is early season here. The Pistons come in 5 of Detroit. The Toronto Raptors, number 6. The Denver Nuggets, number 7. And we're trying to get to number 8 here. Number 8 is the Memphis Grizzlies. Number 9, the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Wizards of Washington, 10. The Orlando Magic, 11. The Timberwolves, T-Wolves of Minnesota, number 12. They won tonight, I believe. And we'll get the scores here in a minute. Number 13, the Thunder. The Bucks, 14, 15. The Blazers of Portland, 18, the Pelicans of New Orleans, and 17, the 76ers of Philadelphia, 18, the LA Clippers, kind of believe that. The Knickerbockers are in normal territory at 19, the Utah Jazz at 20, the Heat at 21, the Hornets at 22 of Charlotte, the Pacers of Indiana 23, 24 the Lakers, unusual. The Nets of Brooklyn at 25, the Suns at 26, the Sacramento Kings, 27. Anyway, 28, the Mavericks, 29, the Bulls, the Hawks of 30. That finishes up. Let's go to the scores. From last night, the Wizards 110, the Kings 92. That's in D.C. The Cavaliers pulled it out 104 to 101 of the Knickerbockers. The Grizzlies lost to the Bucks 110-103. The Hawks and the Pelicans 106. Can't get closer than this, 105 for the Hawks. The Lakers and Suns, Lakers pulled that one out in Phoenix 100 to 93. The T-Wolves and the Jazz in Utah 103 for the T-Wolves, 109, and 98 for the Jazz. The Nuggets out in Portland, the Trailblazers 99 to 82. The Magic in the Bay, the Warriors 110 to 100. And the 76ers and Clippers in Los Angeles, 76ers 109 to 105. That does it for sports, and this will do it for us. Politics in Black and White. I guess we could subtitle that from Adam Clayton Powell to Judge Roy Moore. And from the toxic Republican Party, its leadership, McConnell, Hopalong Cassidy, and these various other characters that deprived America of, tried to deprive and is still working on it, of health care. Millions of people suffering thousands of people would die as a result of that. I mean, this is treachery at its best. And the reason that these side issues and little emotional issues, but we have to look back in history very, very clearly to Emmett Till, to the Scottsboro, and various other cases there, and most recently the case of the All-American hero Orenthal James Simpson, a man that was literally maligned. And then we can go to a more modern case of Bill Cosby, a man that is being retried. So these are things that are coming out, and then we have just a slew of so-called Hollywood from the Wiseman things, man being deflocked. But this is a series of things that are happening now, and what effect we'll look at in 2 weeks, where the polling is very important. Now, other schemes have been floated. To have the racist Beauregard Sessions retire and come back. Now, I mean, this is just unusual. What this shows is a pre-existing bias against Roy Moore. And when you have this kind of thing going on, this should not even be looked at, because the Republican Party from day one did not want Roy Moore. They put up this hack that they had, a lobbyist named Luther Strangelove. Luther Strangelove couldn't cut it. Moore won it, based upon the backbone of the Republican Party. Moore was not outside the Republican Party. He was inside the Republican Party. This is their wing. In fact, their biggest wing, over 40% of them. So in other words, when they use the evangelical Christians, that is their wing, then they have to throw together a few quote-unquote normal Republicans, right-wingers, and then some independents to win elections, as DJ Trump did. Without the evangelicals, DJ Trump would have not won the election. Without the evangelicals, even this old fool McConnell would have not been able to beat Allison London Grimes, which he goes around maligning. So in other words, this is the whole situation here, the whole ball of wax, nothing unusual there. It's a cesspool. But it will all sort itself out in Alabama. It will not sort itself out in Washington. Now, other schemes have been floated to have this hack named Ivy extend the election period. I mean, all kinds of schemes there that are against Moore. And, I mean, the schoolboy's simple. You don't throw up those kinds of roadblocks, extending elections, bringing back people to run, talk of expelling Moore before he even gets to the Senate, and then come out with these stories and make them credible. It just does not happen. It is in black and white on the 14th of November, 2017. Bostonred for WBRN Radio and the Bostonred Network. Good day.